Hello everyone and welcome to another update on Bionic. So in the last couple of weeks I've been working in quite a few things, some related to PWA, fixed some of the issues related with the camera on Android and much more. In addition to that, I also started in this last week working on the Bionic Monitor, for which I have now some a preliminary version of it. I'm still gonna add some updates and some improvements on this, maybe even on the way I'm actually monitoring. But for now, this is working just fine in both standalone and hosted applications. And because of that, I decided already to share it. And if you guys have any comments, improvements, things like that, please just let me know, or open a ticket on the GitHub repo for that. And we'll do what we can to improve it. So how do we use Bionic Monitor? Well, the first thing is to install Bionic Monitor. It's just another CLI tool that you don't need Bionic for anything. You can just run it on the normal Blazor project. And if you're not using Bionic, that's just fine. You can use Bionic Monitor as well. And then it has a command line. It has a tool named Bionic Monitor. I'm going to show you how this works and how, if you have an issue, you can actually kind of think through it and maybe solve your own issue. So let's have a look at it. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a standalone project, and then I'll do another demo on the hosted project. So .NET new Blazor standalone app. All right. Okay, let's open this. Oops, not the kind of open that I was trying to do code, not open. All right. I literally did open. And so there's our app. So the way it works is by listening to a www root changes. And so if there are changes in the www root, it should listen to those changes, and as soon as it detects the changes in there, then it will update. Now, in order to update, it's actually leveraging SignalR, and through SignalR sends a message to the browser and says, hey, can you reload this page? And that's just how it works. To do that, though, it needs to inject SignalR library and the handling code to handle that request. So let's first just do a .NET build on this thing, just to run it. How about changing into... All right, so let's just build this. In the meantime, I'll explain a little bit more. So you're gonna have a www root and needs to inject something in here in order to run that, listen for an update from the server saying, hey, I detected some change, can you reload the Blazor app? But this is not optimal, obviously, because it's changing our source code and injecting something that we really don't want in production. So because of that, the idea was that this root gets replicated into a working root, and the server is going to serve from that other root directory, which is going to inject that those changes without modifying in that other directory, without modifying any of your original code. So that's basically the idea here. So this should now be working. And there we go, we have our normal app. So I'm gonna kill this, I'm gonna kill the server. And now from here, I'm gonna do biomon-h. All right, so biomon can run without any commands. And if you're running on Blazor app, in the root of the directory of a Blazor app, client side, then it's going to detect that, and if you're not in such a thing, then if it doesn't see a www root directory, it's going to say, hey, I don't think this is a Blazor app. So when you run it, though, if you just do biomon, you'll see it will start the server just fine without any issue. But as I said, they already injected the necessary SignalR library and the handling script, right? And if I do this, is going to detect and reload immediately. So we already see that the reloading is working, but again, we don't want this because it's injecting this in our directory. So you might want to do this quickly if you want to use something like that, but it's suboptimal in my opinion, and it shouldn't be used like this. So because of that, it actually has two ways of doing, a quicker way and another way if you don't want to use it this original way. So the quicker way, it integrates with the .bionic directory. So let me kill the server. If you're using Bionic, you'll see that Bionic will eventually, if you add the platform, add a .bionic directory where it stores the plugins, the platform plugins, and some other information, or a script if you're using Bionic Blast scripting as well. So in that directory, you can do Bionic Monitor /help, and you'll see that you have a .bionic. So and it tells you that it's going to create a copy of our www root under .bionic. So let's go Bionic Monitor /bionic. All right, so at this stage, what it did was create this Bionic directory, as mentioned, and the www root directory in there. So now this server is actually listening for changes in www root. In addition to that, it also listens for changes under debug dist, right, in this directory, because that's where, when you're developing, the changes are, Blazor compiles into this directory, right, into distribution directory. So it's also listening for changes in there. So for example, now I could make a change in, say, this page over here. And instead of having a counter like we have it in here, we're going to do a demo counter. Now I saved it, but it's still not building. So let's build this in here. And as soon as I build this, it should automatically load. All right, so as reload, we have the demo counter and all that. So another thing is, if you're using Visual Studio or any other thing and you click on your build, or if you are in Visual Studio for Mac, you do Command K, for example, it will automatically build and update and reload this thing. The same thing if you're using Rider. For example, I'm going to show with Rider. My Visual Studio is not really building right now. I think some SDK issue, but I can show it with Rider. So I can open, yes, sorry, Standalone there. Let me just open Rider very quickly so you guys can see this working with Rider. But I normally do things through the command line. I don't build almost anything through the... All right, so this is loading. Let me bring this down over here. We can kill this page. And you'll notice that as soon as you start the server, it will also launch the app, it'll open the page on your default browser. All right, so this is now in Rider, and in Rider there's I'll show another trick in a minute, but if I just build this, I should see this reloading. There you go. So the same thing, if I would go now to the page and change this from demo and do a rebuild. So now it should just show counter in the next load. All right, so I'm going to kill Rider. By the way, if actually, yeah, I'll bring it up in a second again. All right, because there's one detail in there in the next section I'm going to say. Okay, so this is if you're using .bionic www root. If you don't want to use Bionic www root, well, there's a solution for that as well. You can specify I'm gonna move this into trash, and you can specify your own directory by doing bionic -- destination root dir, and we can say I want to use root beer as my directory. Okay, that's fine as well. Destination root there. Am I doing something wrong here? Oh, it's not Bionic, sorry. Biomonitor. I guess. Alright, I used a very, very ugly name. Alright, root beer. So that's our new root. The app has been launched and served, and everything is working just fine. All right, so, but now we have an issue, right? So if I do another change in here, you'll see that it's gonna, we don't build automatically. So if I want to build, I would have to build it again. And this is not a nice way of doing things. So for that, we're going to add a watcher, right? So we can add a watcher in here into the CS project. And this watcher is going to look for changes on CS HTML, HTML as well, in case we change our www root, CSS files if you're using Blazor. If you're not using Blazor, you probably, and if you're using Bionic, you just add the S in there, and you do SCSS. And then we want to exclude everything from root beer because we don't want, you know, to be listening for changes in root beer. It would cause a cycle. All right, so at this moment, we're going to start seeing that this can rebuild, but there's another thing we need to do. We need to change the run command, because when we do .NET watch run, it's going to actually build and run this command in here, which we don't want to run anymore because Bionic Monitor is already running. So all we need to do is reloading. All right. So now in here, we have our server running, our Bionic Monitor running, and reloading. And if we do .NET watch run, it's going to build and watch for changes on those files. But it's still not changing. So, and this is because we're listening for changes in here. I mean, if I change a page, it will work. So I can do, if I go back to counter again, and it's going to rebuild, and it's going to detect a change on the distribution directory, and it's going to provide you the page. But if I change the CSS in here, for example, say I want to use a background color of aqua, it's going to build, and it's going to reload, but you're not going to see that change. And that's because we change it on www root, but the root beer still knows nothing about it. So we need to go back into this project and add some copy items. So for example, and this was done on purpose because you might have some resources from other places that I don't know about, and it's going to be hard for Bionic Monitor unless I let you specify every single directory and start listening from all different kinds of directories. That can cause looping listening cycles on the file watchers, and so I'd rather stay away from that, and you can just specify which items you want to copy every time you build. So you add this target in here where it states after targets, and every time you build this copy task is going to run, and it's going to copy everything you have in your, in this case, www root from root files here, and it's going to copy them into our root beer directory, and it's going to keep the exact same structure that you have under www root. All right, so if I save this now you're going to see that the counter is going to be updated because it's now rebuilding, and there we go, we already see the aqua. So this should give you enough power for you to now keep changing everything you want and see your your page reflected immediately, and provide you that kind of node environment that a lot of people likes and enjoys developing with. So that's pretty much everything for standalone. So how do we do the same exact thing for a hosted environment? For a hosted environment, it's pretty much the same thing. So let's create a project in here, .NET new Blazor hosted, I think. /o, let's try hosted app. All right, so I think we got our Blazor hosted. I'm going to close. Sure, that's it. Okay, doesn't matter. And we're no longer listening. Okay. So what's the difference? So for the client, we do pretty much the same thing, right? So we want to change the client CS project to include pretty much the same thing. So we want to come over here. Let's copy this exact same thing. And now we're going to open this one. I think we are on the right place. All right. And so this is going to do exactly the same thing. When I build, it's going to create a root beer directory. Or actually, this time let's go with .bionic /root, so we can change the command. So it's going to copy all this into .bionic root, and we'll leave pretty much everything else the same way. I don't think I need excluding here because dot directories are going to be immediately excluded. But anyway, you got the point. So let's try that. It's going to hosted app. Let's do a first run, or actually a first build. We don't really need to. Just to make sure everything's fine. All right, so everything's fine. I'm not going to run from here because you have to go into the hosted server. So let's go into the hosted client for now. And in here, I'm going to run the same thing as before with a couple of changes. So actually, pretty much everything is going to change. Bionic Monitor, and then I'm going to use Bionic because we use the .bionic directory. And then I'm going to use port 3434 and secure port is 3435. And the reason for that is that we're going to have to run two servers, right? The server that implements the functionality that for the hosted application. So if you have REST services or a REST API that your app is talking to, it's going to be under the hosted server directory, right? And so Under this directory, that's where the actual server is and where you normally run this hosted app. But in this case, we're actually running a side server on a different port to serve your client side of the application. So when you do that, we now have the app being served. So if I do any change on the client side, just as before on the standalone, we should see all that working and immediately updating. All right, so, but that's not everything, because this app still needs to talk to the other server. So if I start the server, we're going to have some issues because, for example, if you go into the page, the fetch data page, this is no longer going to work. So let's just add something in here. We need to point this to localhost 5000, which is our server. But this is not going to work. This is not going to reload, but you'll see that it's still not going to work. And now let's also go in here, just put the build listener so that we can build and reload automatically. So we're going to go into the hosted app and we're going to do the same thing, .NET watch run. Oops. Hosted client, .NET watch run. Okay, so now it should build, it should do the same exact thing that we're seeing before. We can prove that by saving this, and we should see a demo weather forecast in here now. All right, so we still don't have anything, and if you look at the source code in here and see what the HTTP request, you'll notice that it's failing because we don't have the hosted server running. So let's open another terminal. CD hosted hub, and now let's go to the server. All right, so in here we're going to do, if I just do .NET run, it's going to run the server, but it's still going to fail. And the reason is because this app is being served from the server at 3434, at port 3434, which is the Bionic Monitor server. And it's then trying to fetch the weather forecast at the actual hosted server. And at that stage, it's going to fail because it is not going to allow to do cross origin requests for cores. And so we need to allow cores for this server. And the way we do that is by going into the startup of the host server, and we're going to add a couple of things in here. So just before add MVC, and you can find all this on the documentation side, we're going to add this policy, allow def client, and we're going to say that allow all requests coming from 3434 for cross-origin requests. And we're also going to add on the configuration side, just before use MVC, the actual policy to enable that policy. Right, so now I can go ahead and .NET run this project and leave it running, or you can also do the same kind of thing that I did if you put a watcher to build that project. But you can see that it started and the data, the weather forecast is already there. So as soon as I connected this thing and I started the server, immediately detected that. So now you can do your normal development process of, keep changing your things and immediately seeing them build and execute it. Oh, so he's giving me this error, by the way, because again, it's I forgot to remove the on the hosted client. Let's just set these two so that we don't get the issue that we're seeing right now, because there's no, it's basically telling us that there's no, you're doing a .NET watch run, but there's no run command in there. So by doing this and running this again, by adding the run command and the run arguments, then you should be good. And there we go. So we should be good now, and everything is working. So let me know if you have any issues with this, and I'll be glad to try to help. Just open an issue on the project on GitHub, and I'll have a look as soon as I can. Just before I leave, another detail in order to be able to run from the client side on Rider, you'll have to enable after targets, and I describe how you can do that on the web page if you're using Rider. If you're using Visual Studio, you don't have to do that. It actually worked for me at the early of the week, but then I did something and Visual Studio is not working for me. But so if I just open Rider here, just give me a second while Rider opens. It's opening on my other window, so I'm bringing it in. All right, and in here now, if you need to enable the after target, you need to go into Preferences, Build and Execution Deployment, and then Toolset and Build, and then down here you'll see Invoke before build and after build every time you build. So now, because I have this enabled and stays there for every single project forever after, when you build using the hammer, you should see the app reloaded immediately, because it's going to run the target, as I mentioned, this target in here, the copy assets target. And that's it. So let me know if you have any questions, as I mentioned before, and have a great day and a great weekend, guys.